Today on the bench we have 3 handguns. A SIG Sauer P239, a SIG Sauer P226, and a Smith Wesson 44 Magnum revolver. Each of these guns is going to get thoroughly inspected and cleaned, and I'll show you step by step how we go through each one of them, any idiosyncrasies to look out for, and how to properly lubricate and reassemble them. Now, before we get started, I would like to ask that you subscribe to my channel. Chances are pretty good that if you're watching, you're not a subscriber, because 90% of the people who watch this channel haven't subscribed. But subscribing does a few things, including helping to grow the channel. It increases my ad revenue, and it gets a wider distribution to a larger audience. So please do subscribe to the channel. I do appreciate the support. Now, before we get going on any disassembly of a gun, I make sure that I download the appropriate section of the user's manual for that gun. This is off of Sig Sauer's website. This is for the 239 and 226. They're similarly built, so that manual covers both of these pistol models. I want to make sure that I understand all the ins and outs of taking these apart, because there's things that are under spring tension. Sometimes there are things like extractors and safety levers that need to be in particular positions so that you don't accidentally cause irreparable harm to the handgun and have to send it into the manufacturer for repair. So before you embark on any cleaning, make sure you understand the entire process front to back before you get going. The other thing that we're going to be doing is making sure that these guns are safe to handle, and that includes making sure no ammunition is anywhere around, because we simply don't need it, and it ensures that a gun can't accidentally be loaded without my knowing, and it eliminates the possibility of an accidental discharge. We're also going to handle all firearms as if they are loaded. That way you're sure that you'll never have a mishap. That includes keeping the muzzle pointed in a safe direction and your finger off the trigger. All right, let's start with the SIG Sauer P239. First things first, we open the action, make sure the magazine's out, there are no rounds in the chamber. We know that this gun is safe. The features of the gun are your slide lock lever here, this is a decocking lever here, and this is your takedown lever. This is what we're going to use to disassemble the gun. And you start by racking the slide in its rearward position and locking it open, and then rotating the disassembly lever 90 degrees down, like that. Now we pull the slide back a little bit to release it, and it will slide forward off the gun. Be careful, because it's under spring tension, and you want to make sure that you maintain control throughout the disassembly. Next, we remove the recoil spring and the guide rod by pushing in the spring and removing it from the slide. And again, it's under spring tension, so just maintain control. And finally, the barrel just pushes out from the bottom and is taken apart like so. So this is it for field stripping. This is usually all that's required for a basic cleaning. We're going to do an additional step of removing the grips from the gun, because I have talked myself out of removing grips in the past and always regret it, because I always wind up removing them anyway, because there's always something under the grips that need to be cleaned. So what we're going to do is take a screwdriver. I protected the tip with some painter's tape so that I don't mar the finish on the screw. And it's really important when you're doing this to make sure you have a screwdriver that's properly sized for the screw, because what you don't want to do is risk having the screwdriver skip out and then damage the surface of the screw. This tool is a plastic multi-purpose tool. It has a sharpened tip on one end, a flattened blade on the other, and with a little notch there. It's called a spudger, S-P-U-D-G-E-R. It is indispensable when you're using it for cleaning or gunsmithing. You can't harm a metal finish with it because it's soft plastic, and it allows you to get into crevices, cracks, and underneath surfaces in ways that a metal tool won't allow you to do. So we're going to use this to put under the grips so that we can remove them properly, because after time, they're going to get kind of stuck to the frame there. And you can see it takes a little bit of work, but it does pop off. Just because there's been some buildup of tension over time. And this is why I like to take grip panels off, because you can see there's oil there. Sometimes you'll see a lot of buildup of something on the grip frame. There's some more oil from that screw hole. This actually looks fairly dry and it looks pretty good, but I wouldn't know that unless I took the grip panels off. So I've been surprised in the past when removing grip panels to see just how much stuff builds up. And then just pop the other side off. And took a little persuasion to come out. And same thing, there's some oil underneath the screw hole. And on here, we can see that oil in the screw hole here, and then there's some stuff that builds up here, and it gets us exposure to the spring and some other stuff. So it's good. It's a good chance to really get a thorough look at everything. Now the thing to note about this is that there are some exposed springs now. So just be careful, because there is some tension there, and if those fly off, then you might not find them very easily. But I like at least getting them exposed. So what we'll do is we'll go through here, clean it thoroughly, and then put the grips back on, so there's no risk of us losing these wire springs. We're going to use Hoppy's 9 to clean everything today. This is a mild solvent. Does a great job of getting rid of powder residue and dirt. An old toothbrush is perfect for applying this to wider, larger surfaces like these grip panels. The solvent is not going to harm the plastics, the metal, or the finish. Unlike other materials like any acid-based cleaning solutions like vinegar or a rust remover, if you ever do have rust on a blued finished firearm, don't use anything with acid base, because acid removes oxidation, and blued finishes rely on oxidation. You will actually remove the blued finish if you use an acid-based cleaner. So avoid those. Use something like Hoppy's 9. It does not harm the finish at all and does a great job of removing rust and other contaminants. I remove the guide rod from the recoil spring and make sure that everything there is nice and clean. This gun has very little dirt on it, but that is not going to prevent me from giving a thorough once-over. A customer's paying me good money to clean this for him, so I will be double extra sure that it gets the treatment it deserves and that I earn every penny. Anybody can clean the gun by sending a solvent-coated patch down the bore and wiping the surface, but we're diving deep because I want to make sure that this gun looks as good as new as possible. When we look at barrels, we want to inspect the bore, and it's kind of hard to see on video, so I will show you this cool tool that I have called a barrel light. It's just a piece of plastic that's curved. Shine a light source at this end, stick this end in the barrel, and the end of it lights up. You can see as I move my light source here, if I point this end at the light source, that end lights up. So when I put it in the barrel, it lights up the interior and makes it easy to see all the dirt and if there's any damage. It's great too when I'm shooting these videos to show you this way, because I could just hold this up to the light myself and look through it and that would have the same effect, but it's easier to show you this way on video. So plus it's just a cool little tool to have. I don't know how I came to have this. A friend of mine might have given it to me a long time ago, but glad I have it. So for the interior of the barrel, we're going to take a bore rod with a cotton patch We're going to wet the patch with some Hoppy's 9 solvent. Send it down the bore where we're going to get it nice and coated with solvent. Then we'll take a bore brush, run it through. It's a good idea to have something like a towel, rag, or newspapers, or a piece of cardboard, something absorbent on your bench, because when you push the bore brush through, the bristles are going to spit solvent all over the place. Now this barrel was not very dirty to begin with, but you can see how much cleaner it is just by sending the patch and the bore brush down at one time. We're going to let this sit by itself. If there's any residual dirt in there, the solvent will continue to work on that. And then we'll get to work on the slide. The surfaces that we care about most are any surfaces that contact the frame. And that's these surfaces here and these grooves here that go in the rails on the frame. Also, the bolt face here where the firing pin comes out can get pretty dirty. So we're going to give extra attention to that. We're going to look at the back where the firing pin comes out. We're going to look for any buildup back here. And underneath the dovetail sights, you can get some buildup of dirt in those corners too. And where the toothbrush won't fit, we'll use Q-tips. And where the Q-tips won't fit, we'll use the tip of the spudger. On the frame, there's a lot of different areas to be concerned with. This is where all the parts come together and fitments are kind of tight, and you have things like, you know, the hammer here where you got to get down into that. You have to get underneath it. You have springs here where you get buildup of dust and lint. So first thing is just to go over the whole thing with some Hoppy's 9 solvent, and then we can start digging in to all the areas of detail, like in here, which is going to need a good cleaning. One technique I find handy is where you have areas like in the magazine well where you can't fit the head of a toothbrush. Use a bore brush. This is a nylon bristled brush, so it's going to be safe for use on the metal finish, and it fits in there rather nicely. So I put a little bit of solvent on here and work that inside. I'm always sure to look at serrations to get any of the dirt that builds up in there out. Sometimes, because the fingers touch this so much, you get a buildup of oils in there, and that builds up dirt and dust. Sometimes they just get discolored. So I just take my spudger and go through each of the serrations to clean out anything that might be left behind. That includes the serrations on the back of the hammer. So look for every detail when you're trying to do a thorough cleaning, and don't leave anything untouched. You'll be surprised where dirt builds up. Not only are we going to look at the hammer here where it pivots, but also underneath the hammer right now is in the cock position. So to decock it, just hold the hammer with your thumb, pull the trigger, then let the hammer go forward, and dirt's going to build up in here, so we got to get in there too. Now that everything has had solvent applied to it, and I think I've gotten in all the cracks, crevices, and different areas, it's time to wipe it down now. And I'm going to use cotton patches for that. These are nice and soft. They are not lint free though, so you have to be careful when you use these not to leave lint behind. And we're going to go over this more even after I take the patches to them. So we're going to be lint and dust free, but just know that this will leave behind some fuzzies that need to be taken care of. It also gives me an opportunity to make sure that I got rid of any residue. Sometimes, like under the grip panels here on the frame, there's some residue left over, so I'll go over that a second time. And if you notice that there's a buildup of something, that's another great application for the spudger. I use the blade end sometimes just to gently scrape off any built up residue. Now that the barrel has been sitting with solvent in it, we will run a clean patch down there a few times. It's moderately dirty, and we'll keep switching out this patch and running a new one down there until it comes out pretty clean. It's a good amount of dirt for a barrel that looked pretty good before we ran anything down. Just goes to show how much dirt can build up without you realizing it. And that looks pretty clean. Let's do another visual inspection, and I'll show you the difference when you shine a light in there. All the cleaning and wipe down is done initially, so now I'm going to go out to the garage and blow everything off of the air compressor to be sure that I get all the residual dirt and solvent out from every crack and crevice, every angle, every place where two pieces come together or two surfaces are going to meet. I want to make sure it's perfectly clean and dry. Time for a final wipe down and reassembly. I have washed my hands to get any oils, solvents, or residue off of my skin so that I don't leave any on the finish of the gun. I lay everything out in a clean, lint-free cloth. This is an old t-shirt that I have that's been freshly laundered, and I only realize now that it's black, and so is the gun. So it might be a little difficult to see the detail of what I'm doing. You're welcome. That's how I do things. I forgot to mention that I also look at the magazines. This one was not dirty in the slightest, but I do still wipe it down with a patch just to get any dust or residuals off of it. You can get powder buildup sometimes on the follower on the top of the magazine, but this is extremely clean. During our reassembly, we're going to re-lubricate the gun. We're going to use Remington gun oil. This is not an endorsement for this product. It's just something I've been using for many years. Any light gun oil will do the trick just fine. It's important not to over-lubricate the gun. In fact, it tells you that in the instruction manual when it talks about reassembly steps. So we're going to go very light, and we're going to apply some oil to a Q-tip and then run the oiled Q-tip over the surfaces that we want to lubricate. Notice how nice and dry the surfaces are after blowing it out with air and then giving it one final wipe down, because as you blow it with air, you're going to force moisture out from around pivot pins and from underneath springs and from in between mated surfaces. So one final wipe as we reassemble it is going to get the rest of that out. The first step to reassembly is to put the slide assembly back together again. That's the slide, the barrel, the guide rod, and the recoil spring. And there is some lubrication that we're going to have to do to all those parts. Take our Q-tip, put a little oil on it. And oil up the guide rod. and put the spring back on. Next, we take the barrel and reinsert it into the slide. Muzzle end goes first, and then the barrel just drops in like that. And the guide rod goes with the spring into the muzzle end of the slide. And then be very careful, because now you're going to apply some tension to this. Compress the spring and then rest the end of the guide rod against the lug on the barrel. We're going to set that aside, and we're going to reattach the grip panels. With the grip panels back on, we're going to make the slide assembly with the frame, and we're going to put some lubrication on the rails on either side of the frame here and here. Then reassembly is the reverse of disassembly. Just match up the rails on the slide with the frame. Move your slide rearward, and then it's hard to show you. It's hard to show you as I can't manipulate everything and get it right for the camera. So lock your slide back and then rotate your disassembly lever up 90 degrees, and you are completely reassembled. Now we check for functionality. Can we close the slide? We can. If we pull the trigger, does the hammer fall? It does. Rack it again. Now we're going to test the decocking lever, which is this lever here. When we move this down, it's going to decock the hammer. Works like it should. Put the magazine in. Rack the slide, it stays open on its own. Hit the slide release, it closes the slide. Pull the trigger rather, and the hammer falls just like it should. One final polish, and this is good to go. Now we'll tackle the P226. Disassembly is going to be exactly the same as a 239 because it's based on the same design. Takedown lever there, just pivot that 90 degrees down and the slide will come right off. And it's the same with the recoil spring and the guide rod. Just push that in to remove that, and then pop the barrel right out of the slide. You're now completely field stripped. We're just going to take the grip panels off. And finally, the P226 will go back together again after I took compressed air to this and blew it off thoroughly. We're going to start with putting the grip panels back on the frame. This other side of the frame might be tricky because sometimes you got to wrangle with the top of the grip to get underneath the slide release and the decocking lever. Hopefully it will be kind to me. No, that wasn't that wasn't so bad at all. These are the aftermarket Hogue grips, so they're rubber. I sometimes struggle with the plastic ones that come with the SIGs, but that was easy. The lubrication points on here are going to be the hammer pivot and the rails that will accept the slide. Set that aside and put the slide assembly back together again. A little bit of lubrication on the guide rod. Put the barrel in the slide muzzle end first. Drop the rest of it in there. Then take the recoil spring, put that in its receiver, compress the spring, and rest the end of the guide rod up against the lug on the barrel. And be careful, because there's spring pressure there. If that lets go, it's going to go flying. And then just put lubrication on the slide rails that made up with the rails on the frame. Be sure your takedown lever is pointed down like it was when we first disassembled. Match the rails on the slide up to the rails on the frame. Slide it in and rack this all the way back and lock it open with the slide lock lever. Man, it's hard to do it. It's hard to try to show you at the same time, so I'll just do it there, the easy way, because it's hard to hold the gun like this and get it on video. So now that that's done, just flip up your takedown lever 90 degrees, and now you are completely reassembled. Check the function by releasing the slide. Hammer's cocked back, pull the trigger, hammer falls like it should. Rack it. Test the decocking lever. That works properly. Insert the magazine. It stays open like it should. Slide closes correctly. Hammer falls and you pull the trigger. One more wipe down of this and it's good to go. My hands have been freshly cleaned, so there's no oils or dirt on my hands. All the residual oils, solvents, and dirt have been blown off this, so we really just have to put the grip panels back on, lubricate it, then make sure that it functions properly. Lubrication is pretty simple. We're going to put a little oil on the extractor and we'll put a drop down onto the hammer pivot. I like to use a clean Q-tip and put some oil on the Q-tip and then use this to apply on the gun so that I don't over oil it. You can over lubricate a firearm if you're not careful, and you don't want to do that, so you can more accurately control the application of lubricant when you do a method like this. Now we test it. One final polish, and this revolver is good to go. I hope you found this useful. Always make sure you read the owner's manual before engaging in gun cleaning, because they'll have important information that you need to safely, effectively, and efficiently get through the cleaning of your firearm too. I'm really happy to be able to do this for customers who ask me to, because it means a lot to them. Therefore, it means a lot to me. Now keep watching the channel, because I've got a gun cleaning episode coming up you will not want to miss. I have a rifle that is an antique and has been in the owner's family for generations, and he asked me to clean it for him. So I'm stoked to go over that with you and share a little bit of his story. Also, we have Tools in the Hall videos coming up. We've got more After Dark specials that include really cool firearms that I know you're not going to want to miss. Some really cool ARs from Palmetto State. We have a new SIG Sauer P239 with a really cool holographic sight that I got for a customer. We have a flyer drop video that's come out, so go back and check that out if you haven't already. And a ton more stuff. So please do me a favor and click down here now to subscribe so you don't miss any of it. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, use a tool. Don't be one.